Ladies and gents, welcome to another night, another podcast of Shroom Live. Tonight we're going to be talking about port hacking Flathead with Will Twyford. He's been doing lure fishing for 15 to 20 years and he is extra passionate about sharing his knowledge with your listeners and also the next generation of anglers as well. He also plays in a band, plays guitar and does vocals, just to add that in there. I don't know where that's going to lead anywhere, so we're not going to be talking about that. But anyway, let's welcome the guest to the podcast tonight. So welcome, Will. How you going, mate?
Good, man. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming on board because this, I believe, is the first time I'm going to be talking about Flathead and in particular the port hacking system as well, which is something that I've been looking into because, you know, come summer, that's definitely one of those species and locations that pops up into everyone's minds. But, you know, first of all, let's just take a quick step back so that we can better understand, you know, who you are. So what sort of upbringing that led you into fishing? So let's just go through a little bit of your background.
Yeah, so I've been living in Western Sydney my whole life. I was born in Fairfield. Moved to Hoxton Park when I was probably 10, I guess. And my old man and my grandfather were both fishers, and I'm pretty sure his father as well. So I come from a generational line of fishermen. You know, my grandfather was a game fisher out of St George's Game Club, chasing makos, yellowfin, marlin, anything you can think of that would be out off the shelf. He was chasing it. And then my old man was um, loved fishing up at Sussex a lot, you know, Shoalhaven,
Yep.
doing all that sort of stuff, you know, chasing flatties, going prawning, chasing blackfish, brim, pretty much anything that would bite, he'd chase. So, and he stepped me in, he introduced me to Starlo when I was real young, and I've had this obsession with soft plastics pretty much ever since.
Awesome. So it sounds like you have been exposed to all kinds of fishing,
Yeah,
all types, and soft plastics fishing definitely is one of those, you know, genres of fishing that's just it's a mainstay and it's bigger than ever, I'd say. What's
yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Oh man, you walk into any tackle store right now, and the first thing you see is a wall of soft plastics and a wall of jig heads to match, right? You know, you've got every sort of soft plastic you could think of for chasing any sort of species that you want. Inshore, offshore, you know, bass, any sort of freshwater species. You know, people even fish carp on small soft plastics. So, you know, pretty much anything you want to chase on soft plastics, you can.
Yeah. I'd just like to add so that the listener can get up to speed. So I didn't mention in the introduction that Will also used to work at BCF. So he's been in and around, you know, the shelves with all the gear and serving customers like yourself. So he understands, you know, what's been hot and what the angler's interested in. So we'll definitely talk a little bit about that later. Now, moving on, Flathead. So when did you start to focus on this particular species?
So I started fishing them on bait, as most young 8 to 10 year old anglers do. Kelso Beach up in Milperra was a pretty much a hot spot for my dad and I to go down and catch a couple of flatties every
Yep.
Sunday morning, essentially. And then we started venturing a bit further up the Georges to Saltpan Creek, and that's when I really started to get uh, introduced to soft plastics fishing for flathead. And the first plastic that I ever caught a flatty on was I got a packet of them here. It's there were the 4 inch version of this. It's the power bait power bait minnow. It's a
Right.
4 inch minnow
Yep.
in this color, which is pearl watermelon shad with scales.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure I was fishing it on like maybe a half-ounce jig head that I just scooped out of the bottom of a tackle box that had probably been sitting there for 5 years, never been used before.
Right.
I chucked it on, had a few casts, managed to snag a flatty. Probably would have been legal, but that was the first. That was the pivotal point to where I thought, hey, these things actually work.
Yeah, that's probably where you bit the bug, and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
rest is history.
yeah, that's right.
I'd just like to ask you about those lures. Are they still
Yeah,
available for purchase?
yeah, they are. So I picked up this pack from Complete Angler in Gregory Hills about 2 weeks ago. So yeah,
Excellent.
and that size and that color are still available. You know, they do a 3 inch and a 4 inch, and you can get them with or without the scales, which is just glitter. Um, and they are honestly one of the most gun plastics to start fishing for flatties with.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm trying to sell anything here, but that
Yeah,
3-inch version, I
yeah,
caught my first 40 centimeter brim on that.
right.
So I was sold. It was the
Yeah,
first time I was using it as well. So I haven't
yeah.
used them as much since that's happened. I really don't know why. I really should have just stocked up. I'm an angler
Yeah,
that just stocks up on lures that that you catch one
it's
fish and suddenly I've got 5 packs or 10 packs.
yeah. I know. I know 100% what you're talking about. There's just here. I've got a drawer full of soft plastics that is just filled to the brim. I can hardly close it, and it's got everything you can think of in there.
Yeah, awesome. Now that's so you basically it sounds like you've been fishing the Georges River for a lot of the time.
Yeah,
At least when you started, Kelso Beach, very popular spot. You can drive
yeah,
by it. It's just within. I mean, you can even just have a look out the window as you're driving along that road, and
yeah.
hey,
Henry
is anyone
Lawson
on that
Drive.
beach? Is any
Yeah,
rods out there? Um, just that little pocket there, and then obviously if you keep going further up, plenty of areas.
yeah. Get up into East Hills and places like that. There's cracker spots up there.
What about like say in comparison to Port Hacking, the condition of the water, the way it looks and it behaves?
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
So the hacking essentially starts at Audley, right? So up into the Royal National Park, probably about 5 minutes off of the Princes Highway at Engadine. And that's a fairly narrow stretch of river for about, I'd say, probably 2.5, maybe 3 kilometers
Yeah.
until you hit Swallow, I think it's Swallow Rock, the boat ramp up there,
Yep.
just before you hit Grays Point, which is
Yep.
essentially where you start to see flats, you start to see drop offs. You are just around the corner from where it opens right up into the wider Port Hacking.
Yep.
And that is essentially like a third size of the Georges. If you took the Georges and you shrunk it down to the size of the Hacking, it's a very similar looking system with, a lot of skinnier water towards Audley Weir, where and the funny thing about that, right, is you still get, because it's a short system, you still get your, I guess you would call them pelagic species up there, such as Taylor, um, salmon we've seen up there. You get kingfish up there, right the way up to the weir where they can hold bait up against that wall. Um, and on the king tides, especially coming into summer right now, where we will have the highest tides of the year, is one of those times where you can go up and see those fish up there of a morning chasing bait, especially
Right.
on a high tide. As when the tide's about to turn, I find is one of the prime times because there's so much water for those fish to be sort of holding in and waiting for bait to come past. And once they sort of hone in on where that bait is, it's just a all hell breaks loose type situation. And you get bust ups right up there, which is, well, it's always cool to see. Um, and a lot of people do fish it. The only gripe I have with up that far is you do need a parks certificate or pass
Yeah.
that you pay for, which is like $12 or something like that. But apart from that, absolutely cracker spot to fish, and you get your brim, whiting, flathead. All your bread and butter species are up there too, and it's mainly sand, a little bit of mud, lots of rocks, lots of structure. There's trees everywhere up there, so there's always branches and logs falling in the water left, right, and center. So it's absolutely cracker up there on its day. Um, the one thing I've heard up there, which I wouldn't be surprised if on a really clean day where there's nice water clarity, is squid being caught up there. I've
Right.
never seen
Yep.
it myself, but I wouldn't be surprised. It is a very clean system up there.
Yeah. I've caught squid as far as Gray's Point.
Yeah,
So, and it wasn't just one. There was a few that day. So
yeah, and that's not that far. It's probably another 2 kilometers, and realistically, that's not that far to travel for a squid.
that's right. It's
Yeah.
basically just around the corner. And then
Mm.
once you turn around the corner, Gray's Point, it just opens up. How would you
Yeah,
describe the
that's right.
rest of the nature of the Port Hacking?
Yeah, well, it's lots of flats and a
Yep.
couple of deep channels, right? So if you look at Port Hacking on Google Earth, you'll notice there's a lot of shallow water, and there's a couple of bays like you've got is it Yarra Bay, and then you've obviously got Gunnamatta as well, which are fairly deep, but only on one side of the actual bay is channel-esque, right? The
Yep.
rest of it is flat, especially for Gunnamatta. Um, and I find those are the sorts of places where you are going to find flathead, right? Anywhere where you can have tidal flow, good tidal flow, a lot of bait, places where there's going to be weed patches, drop offs, holes for the fish to lay in, etc. Those are going to be the spots where you're not only going to find fish, you're going to find schools of fish. And flathead are supposed schooling fish. Generally, if you catch one or two, you can catch a couple more in the same area, right? So if you're if you're up on those flats, one of the main things to look out for, especially if you're on the flats on a low tide where you can walk the flats without water on them, is flathead lays, right?
Yep.
So um, up at Gunnamatta, you can find these. You can find also a lot of stingray lays as well. And anywhere there's going to be stingrays, there's going to be flathead. They're a very
Right.
similar style of feeder. You'll see stingrays as sort of, they cruise around on the bottom, trying to find, little morsels and stuff like that that are hanging around. And every so often they'll get a fish or a small squid or something like that. And flathead are very similar in the way that they'll ambush prey like that. I find sometimes they'll really dig themselves into the bottom of the system,
Yep.
to the point where it's only their eyes will be out of the water. But up in the shallower flats, I find they don't do that. I find they'll be more active, especially on a high tide. They're actively feeding. They're waiting for fish or crabs or squid or anything, prawns to come along, and they're never afraid to have a crack. Right? This is why they're so fun to catch. They're Australia's greatest sport fish, in my opinion.
Yep.
You got the Aussie bass, you got the yellowfin brim, and the flathead. They're our top three. Right? People rave on about cod and barra, and my arms get tired if I'm casting those lures around. You know, give me an 1/8 ounce with a curly tail on the back of it. I'll cast a
Yep.
flathead all day. So yeah, it's that system has a lot of variation. I'd like to think more so than more so than a lot of other systems. Right, the harbour is very deep. for a long way. And I find if you get a lot of dead zones, right? Where
Well, I guess the fish aren't just all sort of, spread out evenly is probably what you're trying to say.
that's right. So you get a lot of dead zones in the deep water in the harbour, whereas I find because the hacking's not deep, right? It's not a deep system, not compared to the harbour at least. It's comparable to botany.
Yep.
I think that's why it's so popular for flathead fishing. And if you go around to sort of places like Bundina, um, yeah, there's surf style beaches where they're getting swell from the ocean through the heads,
Yep.
but they're
There's a
still
few
fairly
waves.
shallow. They're still fairly
That's
shallow,
right.
right? So you can go and you can still throw lures. Hard bodies work great in this situation. Um, I've found that if you're casting hard bodies around sort of breaking waves, flatties tend to like that as like an inshore version of doing that sort of casting. So casting and breaking waves and such, um, which can be effective on its day, is a very fun way to fish for them. I guess same. You can do the same thing with what do you call it? Like a slider style lure,
Yep.
like a sinking stick bait. Sort of 70 or 80 mil sinking stick bait. Bringing that along underneath the breaking waves tends to be a pretty effective method as well. So
Yeah. That's a good overview of the system. I think
yeah,
I more or less agree. There are definitely some deep sections in port hacking, but
mm,
on the whole, compared to the other two, definitely a lot more spread out in
yeah,
terms of the areas that the fish may be over. A lot
yeah,
of
of course,
flats, a lot of clean, fast flowing water.
yeah,
Yeah, once you start heading up the river, it just narrows quickly.
oh yeah,
So, but every single situation, you should be able to find flathead. But
oh yeah,
chasing flathead
yeah,
on port hacking, let's say that someone wanted to, a young person doesn't want to chase brim as, the first fish on lure because it can be hard.
oh
Everyone knows
yeah,
that. You
yeah.
know,
That's why I don't fish for
yeah, jewfish, mulloway, you can pretty much rule that out. I mean,
them. Yeah,
nothing's stopping anyone from starting
got
off on
gotta be
the
lucky.
toughest, the toughest species. You may get
Yeah,
one bite in a year. You might tick it off on the first day, as one of my mates used to say, or you may tick it off.
fun fact.
You may never
I've
tick it off for
never
a whole year. So,
I've never landed a jewfish.
right. I mean, port hacking isn't quite,
Yeah,
the
I
greatest system for them, in my opinion. I
yeah,
mean, you could
yeah.
still. I've seen.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
I've
I've got
I've
my theories.
never landed one of any size. I've hooked them, just never, always been in the wrong situation. So,
There are some areas where if you, I mean, this is a little bit different, but if you
mm.
soak a bait,
Oh yeah,
you'd come up with a few fish if you know the system well.
yeah,
But as a general rule, you
yeah,
got so many flats out there that if you just fish for something else like flathead,
yeah. You're gonna
chance of
come
running
up
across one is much lower
much
than
higher.
another
Yeah,
system.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So for a beginner, what would you recommend? How should they get started?
In terms of a lure that's gonna just straight up, you're gonna catch fish on. There's no question about it. It's been tried and tested. Is obviously the Z-Man 2.5 inch grubs, right?
Yep.
So that's been a classic lure for pretty much every angler for the last 10 years.
Yep.
That particular lure has ruled the market. There is no lure that I think catches fish easier than the 2.5 inch grubs, especially in motor oil, right? It's a classic natural color. It's kind of changeable depending on how you look at it in the light. Sometimes it looks sort of ambery gold. Other times it looks really green, especially in darker water. It takes that green hue to it. So if you had it's my desert island plastic, right? If I had
Yep.
to take one plastic with me and be dropped on an island and survive, it's the 2.5 inch grubs in motor oil with a 1/8 ounce jig head, and that's going to catch you fish. There's no doubt in my mind about it whatsoever. There's a few variations on the grub style. I think squidgies were early pioneers of that with the wriggler. That's obviously a very similar grub style lure. It's a curl tail with a minnow body. But that sort of set the standard as the fish catcher. Everybody knows the 100 mil squidgy wriggler in bloodworm. That's a classic lure that majority of people carry with them. I try not to leave home without them because they're my pretty much a fallback plastic. If nothing else works, they do type thing. As is the 2.5 inch grubs. But so that really set the standard, and then Z-Man come along with this brand new, Elastec, right? Catch 50 fish on the same plastic is the claim. I don't think people really believed it when it first came out. I certainly did it. And I'm sure they've refined that over the years, the actual plastic itself. Because I've got a few older packs of Z-Mans, and they are a little bit different. So there has been some refining in that process over the past sort of maybe decade, 8 years, such. But I tell you, man, they are the most durable plastics. They stand up to tailor, they stand up to leather jacket, pickers, any sort of fish that's going to destroy your plastic. They tend to stand up, and that's a great option for people who are young and don't have much money. Mum and dad are giving you $50 pocket money for the month, and you run down to the tackle store and you're buying a pack of Z-Man soft plastics, right? Because whilst squidgies are great, power bait are great, gulp's great, they do not last against fish like Taylor, and the hacking, man, that system is chock full of them. They are absolutely everywhere, and they will destroy your plastics if you're not careful. So I definitely think the one to start out with is the Z-Man 2.5 inch grubs in bloodworm, or even any other motor oil, or any other variation of any of the oil colors that they do. So there's midnight oil, dirty oil, blood oil. I think there might be a couple more, but any of those sort of, I've got one here. So that's the color. You can see sort of in the light, it's a very, you got this very green looking body where it's a bit more dense, but as the tail sort of catches the light, it's very amber colored, right? Yep. So that's the classic, first plastic most people want to pull out of their bag.
Yeah, it makes sense. I agree with a young person that's starting off. Money is potentially an issue.
Yeah.
You can easily just have fun with a pack of plastics, but if you're running into hordes of Taylor, if they're like 60 centimeters, all good.
Oh, that's fine with me. That's fine with me. Anything that pulls is great, but
there's some big ones in the hacking. I've got some big ones.
I'll tell you, I was up there probably a couple months ago, just as the weather started to warm up, right? And I'm fishing up the Upper Grays Point out at the end of the flats at Gundomain in the channel, and I'm throwing one of the power baits that I was talking about earlier.
Yep.
And I hooked something big, man. I could not stop this thing for the life of me. I don't know what it was. I reckon it might have been a big Tailor.
Yeah.
Because he just wrapped me around a pole. There's a channel marker right at the end of the flats.
That's right. Yeah.
But that was probably the biggest fish I've hooked this year. And I was just like, I'm standing knee deep in the water. What could I do? I'm running 8-pound line. There's no stopping that fish. So yeah, there's some big ones in there, and they're out to kill.
Yeah. In addition to, say, the soft plastics, do you use anything else, such as hard bodies or maybe vibes?
Vibes.
Other lure types?
Yeah, vibes a lot, actually. Actually, one of my favorites at the moment is this guy. This is the new Nomad Squid Trex in the 55 mil, right?
Yep.
And that thing, for some reason, it looks kind of goofy. It's it doesn't even swim real straight. Like I bring it back and it's sort of off to the side, but it just catches fish, and it's a soft vibe, and it's made of that similar plastic to a Z-Man, sort of Elastec style plastic.
Yep.
Um, and they're not expensive in terms of a vibe. I think they're about $17. They come in a
Yep.
range of different squid style colors, but I really like this sort of black and gold with some flake in it. I find that tends to work the best.
Yep.
Other options are obviously the
Yeah.
classic.
Now before you go on, I've got something
Yeah.
to add there. So
Okay.
yeah, so those squid treks are new on the market.
Yeah.
I've actually Nomad Design sent me a bunch of these lures, and I've actually not had too much opportunity to put them through their paces, but yeah, I've been able to catch a brim and I haven't landed any, but I've dropped like a
Oh
couple
yeah.
of
Drop the
flathead.
brim. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh okay. Yeah.
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 But I haven't
No,
used
that.
that size. I've used the small one and the largest one. I tried throwing the
Yeah.
largest one for kings, but kingfish just,
When they don't want lures, they don't want
you don't know what they want on any
them.
particular day. So
No. They're very picky. They don't know what they want.
yeah.
But
So
yeah.
just so if they're wondering what was going on, that's what's going on with me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No. I definitely recommend the squid tracks, especially for anyone who's never fished a vibe before. Um, they're very, very easy. They got a lot of legs hanging off them and stuff like that. So, uh, lot of bite triggers, right? And they've got scent on them out of the packet. Um, but another one of my, this is a classic. Everybody's got one of these. It's a TT Switchblade,
Yeah.
and TT, if if they aren't already, should be the standard for Australian tackle manufacturing. I find that everything that TT has done in the past sort of 5 or 10 years has proven its worth on the market more than a lot of other companies have.
Right.
Um, and I find they listen to the consumer a lot. Like Justin, the head of Tackle Tactics, is a great guy. Puts up YouTube videos, doing all sorts of stuff, fishing for all sorts of fish up in Queensland where he is, and he should like they are one of the most informed companies uh, in Australia right now. I would suggest in the tackle market, right? And they just know what's going to catch fish, right? And the TT Switchblade is a perfect example of that because that is something that, you know, pretty much every person who's fished for brim and flathead has looked at that and said, yeah, that's going to catch fish, right? Um, there used to be a color called Red Nightmare that they don't do anymore. You can still find them. They're cheap. They're like $15 each, and that is the most cracker color I've ever seen in a blade. It's just
Yep.
black with a little red chin, and I think it's got a red eye as well. And that thing just catches fish left, right, and center. I'll tell you what.
Yeah. Now, before we create a rip in the universe with
Oh yeah,
people running to the shelves to grab this,
yeah, yeah.
is
Please
it
don't sell them out.
is it discontinued or just hard to
So,
find
so
in the red
they're discontinued. The Red Nightmare is discontinued, but
Oh, that's it. Let's run.
yeah. Let's go, let's go. Hey, I've got a stash of them, so I'm good.
Yeah.
But they have got these new Switchblade Pluses, which come in a bunch of cracker colors. Like this is their motor oil color,
Yeah.
which I find great for brim, especially in deeper water. I think the brim love that one. A bunch of UV reactive colors, bunch of prawn colors, um, and they do one that is very similar to that old Red Nightmare. I can't remember what it's called, but it's essentially black with an orange chin, with a fluoro orange chin, and
Yeah.
that's a very great substitute. But yeah, as you say, I've probably created a tear in the fabric of space and time by
That's
mentioning
right.
that. So apologies if you can't get them. Um, but if you can, go for it. They're great. They work on pretty much every fish you can think of. So
Awesome. What
yeah.
about another lure?
Um, there's been one that I've been fishing with lately that I think a lot of people wrote it off when it first got released by Z-Man. If you haven't figured by now, I'm a I fish mainly Z-Man soft plastics just for the durability and the colors they come in. They're known to work, and they a pack of 6 or 8 plastics is going to last you a while. So very cost effective. But it's this one which is the Z-Man Baby Goat in 3 inch,
Yes. Yep.
and I don't know why this plastic hasn't taken over the market. I've got this one rigged on a decoy nail bomb on it and a 103.5 gram. So
Yep.
that's a a fairly weedless rig that if you're fishing heavy cover such as weed beds or snags or anything like that is perfect. And because it's that like sort of flattened grub profile makes weedless rigging really, really easy.
Yep.
And you can use them top water, and flatties will crush them. So, but that's one that I do highly recommend if you're stuck. Say you're overfishing the Z-Man grubs. You don't really want to fish paddle tails or whatever. This is it's a dual paddle tail style with a grub body, and for some reason they just absolutely love it. And it's reminiscent of the old Mr. Twister double tail grubs that came out of the States maybe 30, 35 years ago.
Yep.
And when they were first brought over here, that was pretty much what everybody was catching their flatties on in the first wave of soft plastic fishing in Australia.
Yep.
And so to see a plastic that is essentially the same design, just instead of having a curl tails, it's got paddle tails, um, come out and be not so successful is kind of baffling to me. So I do recommend if you're looking for a different plastic to try, go pick up one of those and they do a bunch of different good colors. Like they do your classic watermelon red. This color is my favorite. It's called Hot Snakes. So it's a sort of a chartreusey green bottom with a green pumpkin top. And
Yep.
that color and they do one called the Deal, which is also a good bait fish color. It's sort of a light bottom, dark top. That's my favorite at the moment. I've been fishing that pretty much non-stop.
Yep.
It's been pretty much that and the Squid Trex vibe has been my go-tos at the moment.
Awesome. Any other lure types that you want to add, or you want to sort of round that off there? There are quite a few lures.
There's a couple I do want to talk about. That again, I can understand why these guys didn't sort of fly off the shelves per se when they were released. Or I think they were released maybe 4 or 5 years ago by Z-Man. But it's the TRD bugs. It's
Yep.
a American beaver style bait, right? And it I find that if the fishing's slow and you need to finesse your presentation a little bit, I find that something that has so this has essentially 4 straight tails, 2 short ones and 2 long ones, and when you get them, you just break the claws apart, and they sit on the bottom upright, and those all those legs or tails or claw imitations just flap around really well. And for some reason, that is a great plastic to throw when nothing else is getting hit.
Interesting.
For some reason, they like it. I don't know what it's supposed to mimic,
Yeah.
or even if
Mate.
it's, I think it's supposed to mimic like a craw or like a yabby or something like that.
Yeah. I was gonna
Um,
crack a joke, but I don't know if it's a good
Go
one.
crack it, go on.
I was gonna say, maybe they're just gone vegan for a while. It looks like a
Yeah,
plant.
yeah, it
That one
does
looks
look
like
like
a
a plant.
plant. It doesn't
Yeah,
look
yeah,
like
yeah,
a actual
yeah.
meaty
If that,
offering.
yeah, if that's the go, then the blackfish will be all over this guy.
Yeah.
So no, but this is an absolute cracker plastic, very overlooked. Um, Comes in a great selection of colors. Motor oil. This one is I think I got this particular color from the States, but I think we do it over here. It's just a American standard black with blue flake.
Yeah.
A
Oh,
lot of
they love that color
They
in
love
the
it, and
States.
I've actually got this one rigged up. I haven't tried them yet. In that color, rigged up for tomorrow. So I'm gonna go and give it a crack and see if it picks up. But regardless, they do like your bloodworm, motor oil, greasy prawn, all those classic Z-Man colors they come in.
Yeah, awesome. Now,
Yeah,
let's just quickly go through some techniques or tactics in throwing some of these lures. I
sure.
mean, a lot of the listeners will have their own approach in catching flathead. Maybe it's, two strong lifts or,
Yeah.
whatever it is. What's your approach?
So when I first started, the general consensus was three hops. Three hops, let it sink back to the bottom, leave it for sort of 5 seconds, three hops, back to the bottom. And that was pretty much what everybody who fished plastics did for a long time.
Yeah.
And then I started experimenting with what's called a flicking retrieve, where you're trying to imitate a prawn, sort of flicking through the water column. And it's essentially a series of short hops, you know, maybe 6 or 7 short hops whilst winding at the same time. Um, Tackle Tactics do a couple of good videos on that technique with the Z-Man prawns, and I find it works really, really well for pretty much every type of soft plastic. Um, and a lot of the plastics that you're going to be fishing for flathead do have a lot of built-in tail action. So you don't necessarily need to be implementing so much action. So for a
Yeah.
beginner, I would recommend the classic lift, drop down, lift, drop down. Just one single lift, let it drop down. One big lift, let it drop back down to the bottom. Majority of flathead bites are going to be as your plastic goes back down to the bottom.
Yeah.
Either it's going to be landing in front of them or just straight up on their head if you're lucky. And because they're looking straight up all the time, they're seeing that plastic come down and they think, I'm going to eat that right now. So they'll grab it, and then the next lift that you go for, they'll have it in their mouth, which
Yeah.
is generally, I don't find that a lot of flatties will chase a plastic up. Um, Surface fishing is obviously a little bit different with that. Um, but the general consensus is a flatty won't chase a plastic up if it doesn't have to. So I tend to have a lot of pauses on the bottom, and a lot of the bites you don't even feel, which is kind of weird if you're used to brim fishing. Whereas
Yep.
brim are picking it up off the bottom, they're grabbing it. If you watch brim chasing a plastic in clear water, they're going absolutely berserk around the thing, right? Whereas flatties are generally a little bit more laid back and they'll just eat it as they please. And I find that is what makes them such an effective target fish.
Yep.
So it's a lot about just varying up your retrieves. One hop, two hop, maybe even three. Hell, go four if you want. There's no set method. You know, a lot of people will point you in the direction sort of as we're doing tonight, as to, what method is best, But I think the main thing is find the style that you think works for you, build confidence in that, and then stick to it and back yourself. So a lot of young anglers are real good at that, and sort of developing their own styles of retrieves and stuff like that, which is cool to watch.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about structure, locations, sort of thing.
Yep.
Someone that wants to, get started.
Yep.
What's some basic sort of areas that they could be throwing these lures?
Anywhere where there is a gradient, right? So anywhere that you're going from shallow to deep is the classic flathead ambush zone, right? So if you're, I'm going to give an example of a spot that isn't necessarily in port hacking, but it does have this sort of gradient that I'm talking about, and it's Cars Park up in Cogra Bay, on
Yep.
Botany Bay, right? And if you go there, a lot of it's flats. There's a lot of mud flats and such, but the thing that makes that spot so good is that within the casting distance of an eighth or quarter ounce jig head, it goes from, sort of a foot and a half to about 3 or 4 meters. And that I find is the classic spot that a flathead is going to be hanging out, right? So gradient, yeah, that's my preferred way to fish them. So drop offs are the way to go. And if there's weed beds there, then that's even better.
Yeah, it makes sense. I can see that there's definitely a lot of that sort of shallow with a slight increase of depth all throughout the hacking, actually.
Yep, and you can
So-
see that on Google Earth.
Yeah,
Main Bar is a great spot for that. You've got 500 meters of flats all the way out to the channel, and
Yep.
then you've got that exact gradient that I'm talking about that goes off into the deeper channel. So that's a great place to start if you're looking at going to the hacking, is Main Bar and Bundina, and checking out the flats up there.
yeah,
The channel runs right around the edge of the flats at Main Bar. So on a low tide, you can walk all the way out to the end, and it's all sand. You're not walking through water or anything like that. And once you get out there, you'll see, because the water is very clear, and there's a lot of bait and a lot of what people call eyes, which are the small sort of glass minnows that come in schools. They're all about 1 or 2 centimeters long. A lot of
Yep.
that sort of bait, a lot of potty mullet, a lot of prawns, which is, I think, is the main source of bait in the hacking is good sized prawns, which is why I find prawn lure so effective in there. We'll get onto that. But yeah, definitely Main Bar if you're up around the Bundina area, or even anywhere in the national park, or even out towards sort of Holsworthy, Liverpool area. It's not that far of a drive. It's maybe about an hour max to get
Yep.
out to Main Bar. And on a nice hot summer's day, you can stand in the water, up to your knees or such. I don't recommend going in any further than your knees, because there are sharks.
Yeah. There are stingrays there too. You might step on.
Yeah. Water shoes are a great thing to have as well as a land-based angler. You get them from Kmart for $10, and
Yep.
they will save you so much pain, whether it be from stingrays or oysters or any other sort of stinging type of creature that hangs around. So yeah, definitely water shoes. But yeah, you
Yeah.
can stand in the water and you can just cast that drop off, and you can work your way around, and chances are you're going to find some fish.
Did you want to add anything about prawn lures before we move on? Because we sort of just talked about lures, so it might be a good time to just
Yeah.
add that in.
So, uh, one that I love is obviously the Z-Man 2.5 inch prawns. That's in a dirty oil color. And you can see, so this is where the oil series of colors really comes into its own. So that's the dirty oil, and you can see that's got black flake all the way through it. And it's a much darker green than the classic just standard motor oil. And that's a good thing if you're looking for, say, you've got a darker day, looking for a silhouette. Um, Color choice within that is pretty crucial um, with any type of fishing, I'd say. But in terms of the prawn lure itself, I've got this one rigged on a TT Ned Locks jig head, and that's
Yep.
a flat faced jig head that is going to stand up on the bottom vertical, and that
So
is
why an Ed rig?
so that it's honestly been my favorite way to fish for probably 5 years. It adds so much action to the lure when it's standing up vertical, especially with lures like the 2.5 inch grubs or even the 2 inch crusties. That's a great one for the Ned rig because they've got those thin little tails that are gonna whip around in the current and such, and that just adds that bite trigger. And I find there's nothing else that really compares to it.
Yep.
And if you find it real tough on the day, and you've got those Ned heads, and even if you don't, but I mean, most of us carry pliers with clippers on them, right? They'll have a set of side cutters built into the pliers. You can nip off the front of your standard jig head. Lead is very malleable, so you can nip off the front of that jig head, and that creates your flat face, and it makes it easier for the plastic to stand up straight. And that often can be the difference, especially in wintertime, between not catching fish and catching fish.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I definitely rate the Ned rig. And I
Yeah.
know a lot of people poo-pooed it when it first came out. They were like, "No, this is an American technique. You know, it's designed for freshwater. It's not going to work." Absolutely the best thing that I have fished, apart from actually one other rig that I've been wanting to talk about this. So the Ned rig is my favorite available off the shelf. You know, you can go grab it and it's going to give you something different to fish with, right? But I've been looking at a couple of styles over in the States. This one came out of Japan and it's called a Jika rig. And essentially what it is, it's a EWG hook with a split ring and then a drop shot weight, right? And the drop shot weight is the hardest thing to find out of the three.
Yep.
But there is a supplier on eBay who is local here in Bangor called Blue Seas Tackle Company. And they sell these little 1/8 ounce drop shot weights in a 25 pack for like $10. And you can make these yourself for, you can probably get 20 of these rigs for about $30, right? And that's the cost of the split rings, the cost of the hooks. Obviously, the quality you choose depends on that, but you can get them for as cheap as sort of $10 a pack. And they're very simple to put together. So these drop shot weights come with this little clip closed, so you can pinch your line onto it. If you just get a pair of needle nose pliers in there and open that clip up, and then you can feed your split ring on there, and then follow with your hook, your extra wide gap hook that you choose. And the good thing about this is it's essentially a Ned rig in a way, but once this hits the bottom, the plastic is free to swing any way that it wants, right? And this weight sometimes people will see the weight and they're like, oh, I don't really want to fish with that hanging off the front of my lures, which
Yeah.
obviously, yeah, fair enough. But if you're fishing for flatties, once that plastic hits the bottom, that weight disappears into the silt. That's what makes it so effective. So you've got essentially no weight visible on the hook because it's buried in the silt, and your plastic is standing up, waving around freely in the current.
Yeah.
And you can do this with all the way up to a size 5.0 EWG and all the way down to a size 4 EWG. And it just has probably caught me more fish than any other rig in the past 12 months.
Wow.
And you can buy pre-made versions of it. Owner do one, Decoy do one. A couple other those Japanese companies do them and produce them. They're a bit expensive. It's cheaper to make
Yeah.
them yourself.
Yeah,
Um,
I was about to say, for a beginner, like if
yeah,
they wanted to just grab a few, made already, because you're never
yeah,
too sure if you've put all the things, correctly together.
that's
So there
right. Yeah,
are kits like that, or there are jig heads sold
yeah,
as,
yeah,
yeah,
and it's such an effective way to fish because of the variety of sort of plastics that you can fish on it. You can fish, you can fish prawns, Z-Man grubs, paddle tails, uh, the goat, the 3-inch goat that I showed before, even back to this guy, the bugs, the bugs, they love it on the bugs.
yeah,
Even I got the Crush City Creeper, you know, all of those sort of styles, and it does work best with floating plastics. So any of your Z-Man, Daiwa Bait Junkie, Rapala Crush City, anything that's elastic tends to float. So all of those styles of plastics work great on it, and it does the Ned rig thing where it stands up, and it just allows it to float and go any which way that it wants. So that
yeah,
is probably the most deadly finesse technique that you can imply into your arsenal, really. And
yeah.
it's just like I said, it's caught me more fish than anything else in the last 12 months.
All right, fantastic. Let's move on and talk about conditions
Yeah,
and some of the things that you might be looking out for.
of course.
Like tides, rainfall,
Yeah.
all,
So
all that sort of stuff.
I find above anything else, tides are the most important thing for Flathead specifically. I don't necessarily think moon phases affect it too much. Just as long as you are fishing a tide change is
Yep.
pretty much the key to catching flathead consistently. You can catch them any time of the day. They're not the smartest of fish, which makes them pretty fun to catch. But any tide change, I personally prefer going from a high tide to a run out because it makes it easier as a land-based angler to get the fisher up on the flats feeding,
Yep.
and they're active at that time because they're at a point where they can't normally get to, and they're up, they're chasing nippers or they're chasing small bait fish. Sometimes you get squid up on the flats and stuff like that. So I find that coming from a high tide to when the tide starts to drop, that's the most critical time that you can be out there chasing flatties. And I find that if you can fish a day that is overcast, I find that tends to up your chances a lot because the flatties are usually in not much water.
Yep.
So any sort of warmth in the water tends to make a move a bit. Any sort of sunlight, they tend to move to deeper water. So I find that if you can, or obviously sunrise, sunset, that does the same thing. The fish tend to move around those times. So yeah, overcast days tend to be the most productive. So
Yep. What do you think about rainfall? I know the
it,
hacking can change drastically
oh
after a bit
yeah,
of rain.
yeah, the hacking loves going chocolate sometimes. Um, I think more crucial than the fact that the watercolor has changed or there's been a lot of fresh into the system is the ability to change your colors up. So I find in the darker waters, you're going to want to run darker, more silhouette style plastics. Your blacks, your watermelon reds, your darker versions of motor oil, even colors like this one, the hot snakes, is pretty much the way to go in your once there's been a lot of rain. I know we've had a bit of rain recently, and
Yep.
what's been prevailing are the darker colors. I'm not catching much at the moment on sort of opening night style colors or anything like that. Even though they do have their place and are very effective, at the moment it's the darker colors after the rain that tend to be the fish catchers. So,
Yeah. Would you focus more down in the system, or
oh yeah,
would it
yeah,
matter to you?
yeah. Usually, do you mean down in the water column or this
Or as
the?
in out, say for example, would you be out towards Gray's Point or towards
No,
Bundina, for
no,
example?
I'd be upper system for sure. I find the fresh doesn't affect the flathead too much. Because the fresh water tends to stay in the upper half of the water column anyway. So because that water isn't as dense as the salt water, so naturally the salt water is going to sort of sink to the bottom a little bit. So I find that doesn't affect it too much. So I tend to go up um, to the upper reaches of the system, even as far as Audley,
Yep.
and because when there's a lot of fresh in the system and that salt's getting pushed down, so are the bait fish, right? So it gives the flathead a chance to feed a lot more without as much pressure on them, right? And because of the darker water, there's not as much sunlight, so they're a little bit more willing to feed during the day. But yeah, crucial color choice
Yep.
is the way to go. Like think about also just stick your hand in the water and see what the visibility of it is, right? Whether you've got, or even just see if you can see anything in the water and try and determine how much visibility there is. Because if there's sort of, less than a meter of visibility, there's no point fishing a motor oil colored soft plastic. You'd be wanting to fish blacks or anything close to that
Yep.
just to try and get as much of a silhouetted profile as possible. So, yeah, that's the crucial thing.
Yeah. Moving on. Let's talk about your approach in say the next 3 months.
Yeah,
So what are we? We're in this. Oh, I guess we're at the end of the year basically.
yeah,
Christmas time. So January, February, March.
yeah.
So what would your approach be?
Stay out of the sun. It gets real hot through this time of year.
Yeah.
Um, like especially just this past week, we've had a couple of 40 plus degrees days. So, um, mate, the first thing unrelated to fishing is to make sure that you take care of yourself, right? Don't go out slinging in a 40-degree day, standing out with the water reflecting on you. It's pretty unsafe to do. Prioritize your health. Don't make any silly decisions. Apart from that, I would be fishing the cooler days after a hot day. So, say you have a 38, 39-degree day, the next day is generally going to be a little bit cooler, um, or the day after a heat wave is generally going to drop to about 28, maybe 29 degrees. I find those days tend to be really productive because with the change of temperature comes a little bit of cloud cover, generally. And you tend to get a little bit of rain, stirs up the water a little bit. So fishing after hot days is a pretty good approach. And plus, it's not so hot, it's not uncomfortable or anything like that. And there's definitely going to be less people on the water um, than there would be on a hot day. The hacking can get very chocked with jet skis,
Yeah.
which for somebody who's trying to lure fish on the flats can be a bit frustrating. Um, so generally try and go for your cooler days, and weekdays as well, especially in summertime, because sometimes you can get out on the water and it is just absolutely chockers. So yeah, trying to fish weekdays is probably the best approach.
Yeah. Next question. Now, this one here, you sort of mentioned a few things that would probably answer this one,
Mm.
but is there anything about Flathead that you've learnt about them that, as your understanding has evolved,
Yeah,
that the average person would differ in their opinion with?
they can be a lot more picky than most people think they can be. They can be one of the hardest fish to catch sometimes. You know, some days you go out there, you'll catch anything but a flathead.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm a little bit superstitious. So some days I'll go out with the intent to catch flathead, and for some reason I don't catch a single one. I'll catch brim or tailor or snapper or whatever. And then some days I'll go out and say, okay, I'm going to go target brim, and I can't get away from the flatties. So, um, but yeah, they can be incredibly tough to catch, especially once they get over 60 centimeters. You can get plagued with little ones at times, especially up in the upper reaches of a system.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, they can be tough, man.
What do you think about the size distribution of flathead in Port Hacking? I mean,
It's
everyone that fishes this, waterway,
Yeah,
we're all trying to chase that unicorn.
yeah, that's right. Um, I've seen some big fish come out of there, and I've seen some big lays up on the flats as well. But I think I haven't caught one over 70 out of there. I don't think. Not that I can remember anyway. Um, they are around, yes, but you have to work for them, and the way to do that is to just upsize your gear. You know, uh, bigger lures will weed out the small fish, and there's no simpler way to put that. You can throw around. Like, I'll give you a story, which kind of is the opposite to that big lures, big fish scenario. I was so this is the biggest fish that I have caught that wasn't a kingfish, and it was a flatty. I was fishing up at Woolloomooloo Finger Wharf. So
Yep.
it's as you would know, it's fairly high up off the water, and I'm flicking the pontoons for brim. I used to do a lot of brim fishing back sort of 4 or 5 years ago, and I was flicking something very similar to that. That's a slim swims, 2.5-inch slim swims in midnight oil on a 1/20th hidden weight system. And for some reason, I just let this lure sink all the way to the bottom. And it's probably about 7 or 8 meters deep there. And I hooked a flatty, the biggest flatty I've ever landed. I was on 5 pound straight through fluoro with a 1 to 3 pound rod. And I had I have a little folding net that I carry
Yeah.
with me when I go land-based fishing, and it sort of has a magnetic clasp that I got on my backpack. And uh, it was in front of the restaurants just near the road, and everybody's turned to watch me fight this fish. And I was kind of embarrassed. I was like, oh, all these people in the restaurant are watching me. If I lose this fish, I'm gonna look like a bit of a loser here. So I had to climb down one of the there's ladders leading into the water. So there was this guy, he come over and he was watching, and he was sort of half interested, sort of not. And I was like, man, can I just hand you my rod? You just hold it while I net this fish. This is probably the biggest fish I've ever hooked at the time. And anyway, I climbed down the ladder, and this bloke bumps the bail arm open on this
Oh
72,
no.
ended up being 71 centimeters. and I like grabbed the line, one hand on the
On the net.
on the ladder,
Oh, yes, yes.
nets between my legs, one hand on the line, lock my legs around the ladder, grab the net the fish, and climb back up. I'll send you the photo if you want to pop it up on the
Jeez.
and it's the biggest flatty I've ever hooked, and that was on a 2.5 inch slim swims. So that's a getting into unicorn territory. 70, anything over 70 is good.
Yeah.
Um, but it just goes to show sometimes you just never know what they're gonna eat, man, and they can just be so eating what you don't expect. Like sometimes people like to throw swim baits for the big ones, right?
Yep.
And I find once you get over 4 inches, kind of doesn't matter. They're gonna eat
Right.
it either way if it's a big fish. So I know that there's guys that fish up to 7 inch plastics. They'll fish big 7 inch jerk shads for them on the flats unweighted with the EWG. Right, they'll go down there at dawn before the sun's up
Yep.
and just go and cast. Big white 7 inch jerk shad, and that they tend to go well on them. And there's more success stories of dudes catching them on big lures than there are of dudes catching them on small lures. So I definitely think if you're chasing unicorns, the way to go is to upsize your gear.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about tackle just really briefly, just so that we've covered this, because
They haven't
we
even
haven't
got to
even mentioned
tackle yet.
anything about rods, reels, and stuff. So
Yeah,
what's the
yeah.
general setup?
So for me, it's generally a 2 to 4 kilo rod. I tend to like a shorter rod. It's just something that I like. It's not it's not gospel. The standard is a 7 foot rod. I like a 6.5, specifically 6.5. Um, if 6.6 is close enough, but I'm very specific about the 6.5 thing. Um,
Interesting. Why is that?
I find that when you use a 6.5 blank, when you can find something that's a light rod but it's shorter, there's a lot more power in the butt end of the rod. Um, like my main rod is a old version of the NS1's micro.
Yep.
It's a 6.5, 4 to 8 pound, and that rod is a lot thicker in the butt than a standard 7 foot 2 to 4 kilo would be.
Yep.
And I find that allows me to be a little bit more. It allows me to power fish a little bit more, so I can search for flathead a little bit easier.
Yep.
I can work the plastic a little bit harder, but that is just a personal preference. Um,
Yep.
Not a lot of people tend to search fish or power fish for flathead, um, because they're very easy to find on their day. But yeah, so generally the consensus is a 2 to 4 kilo 7 foot rod. I prefer two piece. Um,
Yep.
one piece is preferred is preferred in quotations by most people, but I don't find it makes that much of a difference. And if you need to travel with it, much easier.
Yep.
Um, and in terms of a reel, any two and a half, 2 or 2,500. Um, my preference is Daiwa myself. Uh, Although
Yep.
Shimano makes some terrific reels, and even brands like Abu Garcia and Okuma make some cracker reels for the money. But so 2,500 is generally where I sit. I'm running a Chaldia LT Finesse Custom, so
Yep.
the FC version in a 2,500 with a shallow spool, um, and I run 8 pound J braid Grand in blue. And on that, generally, I'm running a just over a rod length of 8 pound leader, 8 pound fluorocarbon leader. I'll never use mono unless I'm surface fishing
Right.
because mono floats and fluoro sinks,
Yeah.
and that's literally all it is. But everything else is fluoro. Um, I find that that's a pretty big necessity, um, just purely for abrasion resistance. Um, there's there's been a lot of talk lately of fishing straight braid. I know they've been doing that in America for a long time, but
Okay.
there's a guy on the one of the brim pages on Facebook. I think his name's Scotto James, and I think he's from Tasmania, and he's been catching some cracker brim on straight zero point 0.6 PE braid, and it's been getting me thinking a little bit that I might start to try just tying straight to my lure with braid using a Palomar knot, because that knot in particular will cinch down much nicer than, say, a blood knot or a clinch knot or something like that. So that's an interesting thought to have and to even experiment with. Uh, might be the next wave of popular things.
Yeah.
So
Any particular reason that's been given about that
I
that you
think
can
it's
remember?
I think it's people are getting tired of tying leaders, you
Okay.
know. So because tying leaders when you're out can be real stressful.
Oh
Especially
yeah, absolutely.
if you're not
When your
confident
friend's
in your
hooking up
knots.
and you're not ready to throw your lure in,
Yeah,
it's stress.
yeah, that's a big stress moment, right? So but me personally, I use a standard 5 turn surgeon's knot, uh, which is you take your lines and overlap them, make an overhand, run it through 5 times, pull it tight. You can get that really small, really easily
Yep.
if your lines are pretty much the same size.
Yeah,
And
that honestly is a very good beginner's knot to tie.
yeah,
It's not complicated to remember the steps. I
no,
mean, it
that's right.
doesn't look great, but I've seen it hold.
Oh yeah,
It holds a lot
yeah,
before it pops.
yeah. My other recommended knot is a Slim Beauty. That's that's my because I'll tell you, man, tying an FG knot is one of the most stressful things when you're not out fishing. And when you're
Yeah.
out fishing, it's just stress city, man. So yeah, definitely the Slim Beauty is the good one with a couple of half hitches over,
Yeah.
just to lock that knot in. Um, but other alternatives. So obviously the setup that I described there that I use is a pretty pricey setup, and a lot of people, if not majority of people out there fishing plastics right now, are young kids who are either on mum and dad's allowance, or they're working Maccas, they're at their first job, not getting paid too well. So there's a couple of really, really great options out there for more budget-friendly setups, right? So one
Yeah.
of the ones, and it's just come out, and I actually have one myself, and it's quickly becoming one of my favorite rods to use, is the new TD Hyper from Daiwa. And I've got the 6'6" in a 1 to 2 kilo, but they make pretty much every size you could ever want. I think there's about 25 sizes in that particular rod, and I think they're $160, right? And
Yeah.
they come with quality components, EVA grips. The rod technology that they're using is really, really, uh, it's a bit of a shift from the last wave of cheaper rods. Um, and one of the most important things that often really, really gets overlooked are the guides that are on the rod. Um, I have a particular favorite guide, and it's the Fuji KR Concept, and that's the
Yeah.
slim, narrow frame Fuji guides. And I find that using those guides as opposed to your typical old style O-ring sort of sweeping out guides, it, it's a it reduces the amount of tangles that you're going to have around the guides. Those style of guides allow the line to, especially braided line, to slip off a lot easier, especially in windy conditions, um,
Yep.
than the typical standard style of guide. So that for me personally is a must on a rod, and those TD hypers do have them, and they are great. They look awesome. They feel great. They're light as. Um, and in terms of reels to match that, there's things like the Shimano. I think it's the Nasci,
N-
Nasci.
yeah, the
Um,
Neski.
yeah, that's the one. Or even the brand new Sahara, or
Yep.
the new Sedona. All of these are, sub $200 reels that are gonna last you. Shimano do a 10-year warranty. Most of their reels last that. You know, it's the quality of low budget tackle has gone up
Yep.
tenfold in the last 10 years. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Like the technologies that have been applied into the lower budget product is awesome. Like most of Daiwa's reel now have mag seal, which is if you're fishing saltwater is a pretty crucial thing to have. And Shimano do their core protect as well, which is extending the lifetime of a reel, the serviceable lifetime of a reel by a
Yep.
big way. And there's a lot of smart people that have put a lot of time and effort into making those concepts um, be able to be put into reels at low budgets, which is, it's a game changer for low budget anglers. That
Yep.
their gear that they're buying is quality and it's going to last. And
Yep.
that's, 10 years ago, um, people like myself who didn't have a lot of money were going through tackle quite a bit, fishing the salt. If you happen to drop because it used to be, right, and you would know this, if you drop your reel in the sand, it's pretty gone, you know.
Yep.
And even if you drop your reel in the salt water, it's pretty much it's a done deal. You got to bench that one, go get a new one. But now it's it's pretty much taken it to a point where they can be saved by the owner, through just purely cleaning, right? Cleaning with fresh water and going through and just making sure that you're getting as much sand and crud and stuff out as possible. And yeah, that really really has helped younger anglers be able to extend the lifetime of their hard earned gear.
Yep. Now,
So
I've got one more question for you, but
yeah,
I'd just like to add about, budget, the budget, the low budget options out there. You can obviously get things such as, say Shimano Katana combos, Sienna
yeah,
combos.
yeah,
Daiwa offer theirs as well, Crossfire. There's a bunch of them.
yeah,
They will be even cheaper than some of these options. So if someone
yeah,
was like listening in and thinking, oh, my Christmas
yeah.
money or
Actually,
whatever, my birthday money doesn't quite cover,
yeah.
that you guys, you still have options out there. So just
Well,
just know that.
Daiwa at the moment, what's today? The 15th of December. So I was in BCF today. They have it's either Crossfire or Sweetfire lure packs, and they're beginner packs. They come with a reel, a rod, a couple of packs of plastics, a couple of packs of jig heads, and it's already
Yeah.
spooled, ready to go. And that sort of thing for a young person is a game changer. Like going in and getting that, like seeing something like that as a young person and being able to afford it, that's the sort of thing that's going to keep the younger generation of um, anglers coming back. And then obviously, they'll be investing more, and then you just get this whole wave of young people who are enjoying and are interested, and then obviously extends into conservation. You know, people get interested in fish stocking. Uh, they get interested in native species, etc., etc. So
Yeah.
it's a really big snowball effect, which is honestly awesome to see. With the
Yeah.
amount of young people getting involved.
Yeah. All right. So this is the last question that I've got for you, and that is,
Okay.
relating back to your experience at BCF, you've come
Yeah.
across every type of angler.
Yeah.
From the budget conscious, which we definitely have focused a lot on that in this
Yeah.
podcast. But you've also got those people who go all out
Yeah.
in spending, and
Yeah.
they will, buy the latest and greatest of flagships
Yeah.
available. Any comment on that?
You know what? As much as it pains me to say, right? Once you get over spending sort of $200 on a reel, they don't get any smoother. It's it's purely a materialism thing, and whilst having a Stella or an Exist or an Arity or a Luvius, all of those reels are lovely. You're not fighting GTs on a 2000 size Exist. You know, you can do the same thing with a $300 combo that you can with a $1,200 combo. The one thing I will put that money does buy you quality is braid. I think spending a little bit more on your braid is the key to having a successful time fishing. If you're comfortable, because that's your point of contact with the fish, right? And with your lure and with your casting, everything without line, you can't fish, right? You can fish without a rod, you can hand line. So it's the one point of contact that you have direct with what you're doing. And so I think that is the crucial element is
Yeah.
spending money on your braid. So my personal favorite braid is J Braid Grand. I find it does everything I want it to. There's the new J Braid Expedition, which is very similar. I'm not so much of a fan of the orange color. I prefer the blue just because that's just what I'm
That's
used to.
just your pick. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, there are a lot of quality braids. Shimano Kairiki is a very good one. I use that a fair bit. Uh, there's, I think, stay away from like Fireline. Fireline tends to be very coarse. It's very wiry feeling. You want something that's really soft and supple.
Yep.
Um, and then continuing on from that, the one the one style of fishing where I do reckon that when you spend a lot of money, you get what you pay for is big saltwater stuff, GTs, dogtooth tuna, chasing stuff on poppers where guys are taking out a 14,000 Stella, on a big, jigging rod or a casting rod or something like that. Um, that's the sort of fishing where you get what you pay for because those fish are gonna destroy your gear, right? Because if you take out and not knocking the Daiwa BG, it's a great reel, I'm sure. But if you take out a 14,000 BG and try and pop for GTs or something with that thing's going to crumble after the second fish. Um, there were times where I'd have customers in and they're telling me they're going, chasing big fish up in like the Wind Sundays or Airlie Beach or somewhere like that, and they're like,
Yep.
oh, you know, you as a salesperson, you pitch to them, right? You say, this is what's going to get you what you want. This is in your budget. This might not get what you want, right? And I think that's a hard line to draw because at the end of the day, you don't want to disrespect somebody's personal financial position,
Yep.
especially as a salesperson where they can come back into your store the next day. So I think it's just, and this will apply. It's the Christmas season, so a lot of young kids are just getting into sales at places like BCF, Tackle World, Complete Angler, and uh, you know, respecting somebody's ability to back what they feel like they want is a good thing to uh, you can't try and sell somebody something too hard, because you
Yep.
don't want to come off as just another salesperson who doesn't care. Because at the end of the day, all of the people who work at a place like BCF or Complete Angler, they do care if you catch fish. Like I
Yep.
remember there was this one customer that I had, and he came into our shop and he come up and goes, "Man, I see all these guys on YouTube. They're going out and they're casting around catching flatties, and I want to do that, but all I've got is $30. I don't have a great rod and reel, but I just want to grab some good plastics and a couple of packs of jig heads." And from memory, I sold him some Berkeley Nemesis, the Gulp Nemesis in
Yep.
nuclear chicken.
Yep.
So the red top, green bottom, and just a couple of packs of 1/8 ounce jig heads. The next weekend he come back in and he showed me he caught four, flathead about that big on a cheap
Awesome.
combo. And that is like one of the most gratifying feelings, is knowing that you've gone and helped somebody progress from a place where they were not confident in themselves or their ability to then be confident enough to come back and show me what they caught. That's a real gratifying feeling. Like, so, uh, and I want to obviously pass that on to the younger generation. Like, um,
Awesome.
it just being able to help other people like that. Like, if anybody learns anything from this podcast, that's brilliant. I'm absolutely 100% stoked. Because at the end of the day, this is why we're doing it, so we can enlighten people. You've got years of experience, and so have I. And here we've jumped on here to just help a few people out, even if it is a few, right? It just makes the difference for those people, and that's 100% worth it.
Yeah, there'll definitely be a fair few, Will. So,
I hope so.
um, I think this is a good place to, end the podcast. Will
Call it quits.
Twyford for Port Hacking Flathead. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. But before we go, Will, you gotta tell us, how can people reach you, and if there's anyone that you need to thank, any of your supporters as well.
Yeah, so I've got my old fishing page is just my first name and last name, and then fishing at the end. So it's Will Twyford Fishing. I don't post on that as often as I should. I don't think I've made an actual post in 4 years, but I do intend to start posting on that a little bit more. Um,
Yep.
and then there's my personal, which is it's like Billy No Mates or something like that, with a lot of off-brand letters that shouldn't be there. But um, yeah, I just want to. So my band Greenwood we've just released our third EP, Somewhere with You, in last Friday. So on December 8th, I think it came out. And we're doing a little run. We're doing uh, starting in Sydney, doing Canberra, and then Newcastle in the new year. So that's January 5th, 6th, and 7th. Tickets are cheap. We're playing Mosh Pit Bar in Newtown. I think tickets are $10, $15. But come out, have a look. If you like emo rock music, come out, have some fun. We'll be playing a couple of covers, I think. So yeah, should be a good fun. And yeah, we're real stoked. We've got a couple of good friends on that lineup as well with us from around the state. So yeah, that should be some fun. So yeah,
Awesome.
but that's
That
it.
means I need to get this podcast out as soon as I can, so
As soon
they
as
can get
possible.
these.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Um. Anyone you wanted to thank?
yeah. You know, the one person I actually do want to thank is obviously my partner. She's it's actually our anniversary tomorrow on the 16th, 9 years. So um, yeah, just her in like supporting the fact that I fish as much as I do, and she fishes with me. Sometimes she outfishes me. Majority of the time, she outfishes me. So,
All right,
you
there we
know,
go. Make sure
yeah,
to record that down and
yeah,
replay
yeah,
it
yeah.
every single
Put that
time.
down. Yeah, no, she's a great help, and even we travel a lot together. We do a lot. Like I wouldn't be able to do majority of stuff without her by my side. So yeah, I'm very, very thankful to have her in my life. So
Awesome. Thanks, Will Twyford, for joining us tonight. So, ladies and gents, we're going to finish off here. So, hope you guys enjoyed this one. And if you ever want to come on the podcast, shoot me a DM. If you want to share your knowledge, this is Shroom signing out for the Shroom Live podcast. Catch you next time.